Hey, Crystal.
Hey.
We are here for another episode of Nobody's Muses. We took a little bit of time off.
I had to get my voice back, and you can tell it's
Yes.
still a little interesting sounding, but
I'm so sorry.
we'll
Summertime
power
cold stuck.
through.
Power through like the professional that you are.
Yep.
So, if you're just finding us, if we've somehow stumbled across your YouTube feed or your Instagram or whatever, this is Nobody's Muses. We have done 11 episodes so far. We took and broke down every episode of the Amazon original series Daisy Jones and the Six, based off of the best-selling novel Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. And we talked through every episode, from the music, the culture, what was going on in the country at this time, the characters, did a little bit of comparison between the book and the show. And so we've gone through all of those conversations. So if you are missing Daisy Jones and the Six, like I think we both are, go back and listen to all those episodes or watch all those episodes, because I am missing it. I keep listening to Aurora, the deluxe album that's out on Spotify, because it has all those other additional tracks.
Yep.
So when we go back and we get that, like, what were your top spins of 2023? Mine is definitely gonna be all Aurora.
It's like
Mine's
that
gonna
and
be
Fleetwood
all
Mac,
Aurora.
just over and over.
It's just gonna be Aurora and Yacht Rock probably.
Yeah, hold on. Let me see if I can get my camera to focus. Hold on.
Why? I wonder why it's not focusing for you. That's really weird.
Let's see if I can get it.
Or is it our old eyeballs that are not?
No, I mean, I do have like the beauty filter on. Okay, that's more like it. It was like super blurry, so.
It's
Okay.
our old eyeballs not being able to tell what's going on.
Okay, so what were we talking
So
about?
we're back here again, and Crystal and I have more to talk about on Daisy Jones and the Six. So this week we thought we would spend some time talking about some of the differences between the show and the book. Maybe some of the things that were kind of highs and lows for us. We're not going to tell you anything that you haven't noticed before as a reader and a watcher of the show, or one of the 100 of different articles that have probably been published about this, but we're just going to share our insight and take as we kind of go through and talk about some of the glaring differences between the two. So,
Yep.
where do we want to start?
Well, let's start with. I mean, one of the big differences that we've talked about before is no Pete.
Yeah, there's no Pete.
So,
And we have Chuck, but Chuck's different.
yes. So in the book, Pete is he's basically never talks. He's a member of the band. He's the bass player in the band, and he is Eddie's brother and best friend. And he, basically it's a very kind of funny ongoing thing, because he never talks to the interviewer until the very end. He says like one sentence,
Right.
and that's it. But
Which is kind of a bummer, because then Eddie doesn't have he doesn't have his person.
yes,
Like, in the show, he doesn't have his person.
he doesn't have a person, who kind of backs him up. But
I mean, he's got Warren. He's got Warren in the show, but he doesn't have his brother.
And Pete is very. I think Pete's an interesting character in the sense that I think he's the person that adjusts to the Six the best of anyone. Like he enjoys being in the band. He meets a girl from back home. He quits the band because he's in love with her, and that's it. And then he didn't even want to do the interview, really.
Right. The band
So-
was passed.
And it was just kind of funny, kind of just a running kind of idea. Like, eventually, are we going to hear from Pete? And we do one sentence, and it's kind of a fun build up in the book.
Yeah, because to me, it's kind of typical of his character, in that, he was a part of the story. He was an integral part of the band, but when he left, he left the rock and roll lifestyle.
Which I
So,
think there's a lot of bands like that. There's, Charlie Watts from the Rolling Stones was very, secluded, didn't do a lot of interviews. Like that's kind of a thing,
mhm.
so but and also it makes sense then for them to be called the Six.
Yes,
I mean, that's kind of one of the biggest issues is the fact that
there are not six.
they had to do a lot of plot twists and turns in the series to make it work that they were the Six.
Yeah, they really had to back into that one.
Yeah.
Like you remember from the show, the coffee scene or the coffee shop scene where they're talking,
Yeah.
and they're like, "Why are we still?" Karen brings it up. Why are we still the Dunn brothers?
Right.
And but then they had to force
Kind of like,
Camila in
oh,
there.
Camila's kind of like she's in the band. I'm like,
Force Camila in there as the six,
she's not,
which
but
again, it worked for the show, but for
let
those
it
of us
go. Wasn't
diehards,
gonna
we had to
wasn't gonna
let that
end
one go.
my enjoyment of the series on that, but
Yes, yes, and so then we have also Chuck. So
yes.
we had Chuck in this the show, okay, and Chuck opts to quit the band to leave and go to dental school. And
Yes.
so he leaves. We see him coming back toward the end when they go back to Pittsburgh. But I think, Chuck's character, although brief in the novel, I still think it's important. It's an important part of the storytelling because it lets us kind of know where we were at that point in time in the country.
Yes. I mean, he was drafted. I mean, the Dunn brothers, either of them could have been drafted. The only way you could get out of being drafted was if you were enrolled in college,
Right.
which,
And
we can.
there is a conversation, or I think Billy goes over it, a conversation in the book about where his and Graham's numbers fell,
In
and
the draft
where Eddie
lottery.
and Pete fell, but Chuck fell. Chuck fell at the top of the list. Basically,
Yes.
Chuck ended up at the top of the list and was drafted and only over there for about 6 months before he was killed.
Yeah.
And so I think I think I read some articles again where they talked about changes and differences, and that was just they felt like that one was just too heavy for the
Yeah.
series.
I mean, I feel like maybe it is. It's kind of like, well, we've seen that story so many times. Maybe like what was it really going to add to the story? So it's like what was that going to add to the story?
Right.
So, um, and I do think that one choice that Taylor Jenkins Reid really does make throughout this book is we don't ever have these situations where like they meet Mick Jagger or they nobody really from that past. There's never that kind of moment that you get in a lot of biopics and they make fun of, and like Dewey Cox Walk Hard, where it's like, well, hello there, John Lennon, and there's a cameo by a famous person going, oh, I am John Lennon,
Yeah.
so I think that that's kind of in the same vein of like, let's not, there's these things and they're real, but we don't have to address it too much. I mean, we didn't have to have a whole lot of, there was a lot of other things that happened during that time period. We didn't have them talk about, oh, Nixon or, all these other things. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that
That's
that's
a
kind
really
of,
good point. I mean, you could still they were still able to tell the story of the time
yes,
without having to bring in some of those huge events of history because the focus needed to be on the band, not really on
right.
yeah,
It's
it
a
needed to be on
fantasy,
those.
it's a fantasy world set in the Americas of 70s rock and roll. But it's
Right.
still in a way a fantasy world. I mean, there's no real Teddy Price. He's drawn from different people and influence. There's no, Daisy Jones is not Stevie Nicks. She's a conglomeration of probably many influences for Taylor Jenkins Reid. So I understand kind of you're making this fantasy world, and so that's why you do it.
Right. Right.
And so, like, let's not bring it down by having a guy die.
Yeah, and I think that was exactly what I saw in one of the articles that I read about the differences was yeah, let's not bring the story down by having a main character die very early on in the story, very
Yeah,
early on in the series. So,
yeah. So, and then another big change, really big difference is Simone's character.
Huge difference.
Yeah, I mean, Simone's character in the book is not gay, and I feel like she's a little more integrated into Daisy's life throughout everything that occurs. She is much more like a mother figure to Daisy in the books. They talk about her, making Daisy go to school
Go to
and
school and
graduate from,
graduate. Yeah. Yeah,
and
she had much more. I saw it being a much larger age gap than what it appeared like in the show. In the
yeah, and
book, I got a bigger age. I anticipated like a bigger age gap. I kind of saw it as that like big sister little sister kind of relationship. And also, I mean, did they describe her as being black in the
yes,
book? Okay,
yes.
I couldn't remember that part, and I didn't catch.
Well, I don't
I did
know.
a
Maybe
quick
I
read.
guess I always pictured that she was. If we
Yeah.
got that wrong, tell us. I think she was.
Okay.
The thing I liked, I think it was nice to have Simone. I think it's cool. Let's to add another layer to her.
Hmm.
In the book, because in the book there is a gay character. It's Rod, the manager, which was kind of cool, and he was very casual about it. I'm like, oh yeah, I met this guy, and then we bought a house.
Right.
Um, but Simone, I feel like her care and intense connection with Daisy is much stronger in the book.
Yes.
I mean, I'm not saying it's not good in the series, but especially, I feel like the actress who reads Simone's in the
Hmm.
audible
Hmm.
is like you hear her like concern
Yeah.
whenever Daisy goes off and marries that guy and those things.
And
And
I'm going to discuss that for a second because I think if you have watched the series and you have read the book, you are doing yourself a disservice by not listening to the audiobook
yeah,
because the audiobook in and of itself is, I mean, it is a production. It is not just a simple, you know, duet, dual narration. It's not a single narration. It is truly a cast of characters,
yes,
and some big names that you should know. You know, Judy Greer's in there, and we've talked about that. Pablo Schreiber, Jennifer Beals, Benjamin Bratt. So there are some big players in Hollywood
yeah,
that are reading this book, and I think it harkens back. And I know we talked about this at one point. It harkens back to the radio shows of the 30s and where soap opera got its start,
yeah.
that type of thing. So by missing out on not listening to the audiobook, like you said, when you hear the narrator who is reading Simone's part read it in the book,
It's really
you
intense.
get the depth of the relationship.
Yeah, you really do. And both of them, I think that Jennifer does such a great job to reading Daisy.
Yes.
So, but I like, and one thing I really like in the book that Simone, at the end, Simone, when they talk about where their life is now, Simone became a pretty, she was a disco star, had a moment, but she has a daughter who becomes a big star.
Hmm.
And I liked that for Simone. And I mean, and maybe she and Bernie could have that too, um, in the series world, But I like that she had that connection to music through her daughter,
Yeah.
But I mean, the story of Simone and Bernie in the series, I think, is a great story, and it's also about choices you make and what's more important to you.
Right.
And I
It
feel
was a
like that's
great
kind of
subplot in there, the conversation of, yeah, choosing, love over career or choosing yourself over career.
well, and I mean, ultimately, that's what all of the people in the series and the book do. Simone has to pick. She picks being her authentic self and being with Bernie. Daisy picks being sober and healthy, and and Billy has to do that same thing. All of them have to decide that the music and the six is not worth it.
Right. Right.
You know. So so I like those changes, and but I would say the book also is the Simone character is a very strong and different in good ways.
Yeah. And that's what I think where they did really, really well with this series is that the changes that they made, I don't think were detrimental.
No,
And I struggled at the beginning with some of the music changes. I have since come around and evolved. And a large part of where I came to an okayness and acceptance of these changes of lyrics was in that final episode. But yeah,
yeah,
so I think even, there's nothing that they changed about any of the, omissions of characters that I think did, or the adding depth to Simone and adding in Bernie. I don't think any of those things did any, disservice to the story itself. I think
no,
they didn't seem forced
no, no.
as they went in through it. So,
So, and then another difference, though, that we talked about a little bit in the last few podcasts that we did was Karen and Daisy's relationship. And in the book, there's a lot more interaction with Karen and Daisy. Not a ton more, but I think there's like a really important one because in the series, the person who first calls Daisy out in the band for how much drugs she does is Billy in that really great episode where they they spend the whole day writing a song together, and he asks her how many drugs she does, and she's like, "Oh, I can stop anytime," and she throws the stuff in the toilet. In the book, that's Karen who has that conversation with her. And I'll actually read it. It says, "This is Karen." She says, "Daisy and I were in the back minding our own business the majority of the flight. We had these two chairs facing each other, a couple of cocktails looking out the window. I remember Daisy pulled out a pill box and knocked back two pills, washed them down with a sip of her drink. She started wearing all of those bangles by then, as many as would fit on her arms. Everything clinked when she moved it, so as Daisy is putting her pill box back in her pocket, her bangles start clanging, and I made a joke about how they were built-in tambourines, and she thought that was cool. She took a pen and wrote it down on her hand. And then when she put the pen away, she took out the pill box again and took two pills from it and put them in her mouth. I said, 'Daisy, you just took two.' She said, 'I did?' 'Yeah,' and she just shrugged and swallowed them. I said, 'Come on, don't be one of those people.' And Daisy was irritated by that and shoved the pill box in her hand. 'Take them if you're so worried about it. I don't even need them.' And then she threw the pills at me.
yeah.
So, you know, I think what I liked about that is them just being friends, and I feel like I would have liked a little bit more of that in the series. But I would also say in the series, it makes sense for Billy to confront her of it on it too. So it's not
Yeah.
like a huge loss, but I would have liked those because would have made like that thing we talked about in the last episode where she goes and gives Karen a hug while they're performing because they're all in a bad place. It would have made that even more meaningful.
Right. Right. And I kind of get why they did it because we had to compress so much time. Because that was one thing I went back when we talked about, wanting to kind of redo this or do this episode kind of on some differences. As I went back into the book, and there just so much time had to be compressed. Because in the book or the audiobook, you have Daisy who's having her own career, who's, recorded a record and toured on her own. And now, the Six has done that. They've had records. They've, coming back and Daisy's actually going out and opening for them on tour while she's singing with them. So having to compress so much stuff down into this series, it makes sense why they did what they did. But I do miss, because it did seem like they just didn't have much of a relationship in the show when
I
we
mean,
know.
there's a scene where she gets her out of jail,
Right.
and
But there's not, I think they could have deepened that. I would have liked to have seen that connection deeper because, again, we have these opportunities for relationships with women that we see in the book, these friendships among women that we don't necessarily see in the series. But I get it. There's
Right.
time constraints too.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, and it didn't like it didn't push the story forward necessarily
Right.
because the story isn't about their relationship.
Right. Right. So, a couple of the song differences. So, and I think some of it, I tried to go back and listen to that chapter in particular today, and I'm trying to go back and see my notes that I clicked on, or that I tagged in my book. But two songs that were pretty pivotal in that, and I guess we can talk about the kiss as well, as we have the episode where they're trying to record. There's arguing. Daisy, he's trying. He writes More Fun to Miss, and they're arguing about it. And they go out in the parking lot, and Billy kisses her, very manipulative, to try to get her back on the mic to finish recording. And in turn, the next day, she comes back in there with Regret Me. But in the book, all of that kind of happens very differently. And of course, we know, again, we've got time constraints and things are going to be very different. It was not More Fun to Miss. It was Impossible Woman in the book. So it was Regret Me. It was still called Regret Me in the show as well as in the book, but the lyrics are significantly different. And the kiss is different too.
Right. Because the sequence of events that create More Fun to Miss and Regret Me in the series, they're having this great chemistry, and then the Rolling Stone reporter sees them. Billy gets a little, freaked out because it's like, oh, is there something going on between you two? And Billy's like, oh, no, 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 this is just, an act. And then Daisy finds out that that's what he said, and so she gets super drunk, doesn't show up for the recording session. Billy finds her. She's so drunk, she's standing on glass, all of that. And then he writes this song, and then he kind of bullies her because she's like, I don't want to sing it, I can't sing it. And he just keeps yelling at her, and then that's how it comes about. In the book, there's a similar sequence. She doesn't get mad at him, she's just typical Daisy and partying. And he goes and finds her. And then he comes back and writes Impossible Woman. And the difference is, though, in the book, she's like, I can't sing it. And he's like, you can do it. And he keeps asking her to do it over. Not in a mean way, kind of like he does in the series, but like supporting her. We talked about it a little bit, and then she's so excited that she finally gets it and they sound good. And they agree that it was good. And the actual sequence of happens with Regret Me happens later.
Right. Yeah, I
And
was
they're
picking,
writing, yeah, they're
yeah, I was
writing a
picking through the
song
book
together.
because, yeah, the whole Impossible Woman comes first and the kiss is a little bit later, but again, before she writes Regret Me.
Right. But in the book, she writes it. They're working at the pool house together, at Teddy's pool house, where that's where they write all the stuff. And she is sitting by him on the piano. They have their writing together, and she kisses him.
Yeah.
He's very gentle. He says, I can't do that.
Yeah, it's, as you said, they're sitting there and she says, I was playing a few with him. We were trying to figure out the right note. The few lines Billy had written already, I remember them exactly. Nothing I wouldn't do to go back to the past and wait for you. And he sang it while I was sitting next to him. And Daisy put her hand on mine to stop me from playing and looked at him and said, I really like writing with you. And I said back to her, I really like writing with you too. And then he said, I like a lot about you. And then it goes in and Daisy says, my lips barely grazed his. I could feel them only in the sense that I was aware of having almost felt them. And then he pulled back, and Billy looked at me, and his eyes were so kind when he said it. But he said, I can't. My heart dropped in my chest. I don't mean that figuratively. I could actually feel it sinking in my chest. Billy said, I stuttered thinking about it, about that time. How could I have made one small mistake that would have, how I could have made one small mistake that would have thrown my life away. And so, it's not as, it's
It's
not
not
as
mean.
mean
It's
as
not
it was
like
in the show.
it's actually he's very kind to her, I think. And then she writes "Regret Me," and it's pretty, woof, scorched earth. But so I
Yeah.
think in some ways the book version is different. But to get "Regret Me," I think actually that the series version is a little better because he does kind of mess with her, and
Right.
you know,
I'm still torn with that one because again, the lyrics of the book version, it has one of my favorite lines. And baby, when you think of me, I hope it
yeah,
runs rock and roll. I just love
yeah,
that
it's great.
line. I just love that line. And the way Regret Me played out in the book as their demise was happening was really a a, a great moment for me. A great moment for me. But yeah, so those things kind of played out, but Impossible Woman, I'm trying to go back and look at some of the lyrics. Dancing barefoot in the snow, cold can't touch her, high or low. She's blues dressed up like rock and roll, untouchable, she'll never fold. She'll have you running in the wrong direction, have you coming for the wrong obsession. Oh, she's gunning for your redemption, have you headed back to confession. So it's got some great lyrics too. It's got some great lyrics too. That again, knowing where Billy was kind of mindset wise at that point in time, the lyrics to Impossible Woman make sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think
What was going on with
what I
them?
think works though in the more fun to miss slash regret me moment in the series works so well because both of them are writing out of about each other, calling each other out in very true ways, and they're angry, you know.
Yeah,
But it's also interesting that that's not the song that Billy refuses to sing on the tour. Like "Regret Me,"
right.
and she doesn't refuse to sing "More Fun to Miss." Those aren't the songs they refuse to sing. So
And what's really, I mean, she wrote "Regret Me" for him, but his dig song was for her to sing it.
yeah,
It wasn't him singing. It wasn't him singing a
right.
song to her
That's true.
about her being her
Yep,
being, more fun to
that's true.
miss. It was he wrote it in first person for Daisy to say about
Yeah,
herself,
that's really
which is
yeah.
kind
She
of, here again, we love Billy, but he does some really shitty stuff in the series.
yeah, but so did she.
But that's Billy because Billy
Yeah,
controlled everything and it went Billy's way.
but also, I mean,
So,
so does she. I mean, like what the more practical thing is instead of getting all drunk and high whenever a guy hurts your feelings is maybe going, hey, you hurt my feelings. Like, I thought we had this
use your
connection
words.
and we don't, or whatever, instead of just, so. I mean, the problem with addicts or people in general is we're selfish, and they're both
Right.
really selfish at that
Yeah.
time.
At that point in their lives. Yeah. You're right. You're right. So, one of the things that's a little bit different, well, we have some different, you mentioned Rod, because in the book, Rod is gay. Doesn't really bring it up. You don't really recognize that
That's
throughout
just the thing about him.
the story. Yeah, it's just a thing about him. And then also Teddy. So Teddy died in the midst of the book,
Yes.
as opposed to the show where they kind of are
We don't see him
flashing
die.
back and he had passed away later.
Yeah.
But he died in the midst of,
Right. They were finishing up their tour,
yeah,
and he had a heart attack and dies. I mean,
right.
his character in the book is British, and
Yeah,
of
very
course,
different.
in the and married. In the book, we don't. In the series, we he comes that when he comes home that one time, he has a woman with him, but it seems like he's kind of lives by himself.
Yeah. Well, and she had a name in the book. She was Yasmin.
Yeah. Um,
But,
and I
we
was
never,
and I listened to the showrunner Scott Neustadt talk about it, and he was very influenced. When he was thinking of Teddy, he was thinking of Tom Wilson, who was an important African American producer of that time who did produce a lot of rock albums and was kind of unique in the sense of his position. So, but Teddy's death in the book, like Billy and Daisy had kind of reached a level set there. Like Daisy kind of had her drugs under control. Billy was kind of doing okay. Teddy dies, and they both spiral pretty badly. She gets back to using drugs so hard, and Billy is just overcome with anxiety because he's like, "How am we ever going to make another record again if I don't have Teddy?"
yeah. And I can get that. I can, I'm trying to find in the book.
Which I finished reading that book about the making of Rumors, and before Rumors is even finished, Lindsey Buckingham is already being anxious about how are they going to follow up with it. So this is not an untrue idea. Like, it's never enough.
Hmm.
You're always looking for something else.
Yeah, you've got to think ahead of the next project.
I
You've got
mean,
to create the next hit.
it's not enough to have the one of the most platinum records of all time. What are you going to do next? It's not enough to win an Oscar. Are you going to win a second Oscar?
Hmm.
What is your. It's never enough. And like that to me. So Billy being nervous about that, especially because he depended so much on Teddy, was an interesting part of the story. But I liked it that they didn't have him die.
Because I really liked the father son relationship
Hmm.
that this series provided for Teddy and Billy.
Yeah.
Because I
And
do think that there was a strong, you know, Billy needed that father figure in his life, and Teddy filled that role for him. I thought.
and I feel like it's kind of like not killing Chuck. I don't think we needed that heaviness. I think there was enough heaviness going on with Daisy and Billy that we really
Yeah.
didn't need that.
Well, and we got the heaviness because when he did have the heart attack
Yeah.
and we saw Billy's reaction to it, we
Hmm.
got a very authentic reaction, emotional reaction to it that I think we could all
Yeah.
relate to. We could all relate to.
Yeah.
So,
So another big difference really is just the character of Camila.
yeah.
And there's a lot of little things like in the book Camila doesn't go with Billy on tour. She breaks up with him.
Hmm.
And they're apart, and he does not do well without her. And then when
Right.
they get a record deal, then he was like, if we have a record deal, will you come out here? And you know
Yeah.
and she
Well, even
does.
how they met is
Hmm.
different as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's lots of little things about Camila that are different. Um, and I'm not sure that I liked what they did with her in the show.
Oh,
I mean, there were parts of it that I just really liked her character a lot in the book.
tell me about the things that you.
I just felt like she was way more independent and way more her own person in the book than she was not putting up with it. And I know that there's the scene in the show where she shows up pregnant with Julia and catches him when he is in the bottom, when
Mm-hmm.
he is hitting rock bottom. And that conversation that they have in the motel room. And I know, and again, she had that other conversation. Do you love her? No, I don't. And she's, if that happens, then this is over. That conversation in the kitchen in one of the episodes. So she does have those brief, and I guess again we go back to the time constraint. We do have those brief moments where you do see. I see the Camilla from the book up on the screen. And so maybe it is just a time crunch because she had so many of those. I feel like she had so many of those in the book. And I guess they just didn't have time to put all of that in there.
I don't know. I mean,
Thoughts?
I feel like sometimes the book Camilla is just a little too. She doesn't show her jealousy, which she had to have been jealous.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think that kind of goes to, like we talk about in the unreliable narrator and the fact that she's being interviewed by her daughter.
Sure.
So, and it's 20, it's 40 years later in the book, 30 years later. So part of it's that, but I think it is good. I mean, I don't know. Sometimes I felt like Camila wasn't, I feel like she should have been a little bit jealous. I think she was just the right amount of jealous in the
Mm-hmm.
series. Like, you see this stuff, interaction with your husband and this woman, like, you would have to have some of that.
Yeah. And that
I,
wasn't a part of her that I disliked in the series.
yeah. I mean,
Um,
I do think that Camila is kind of a difficult character in the sense that because Billy puts her on a pedestal, we as the audience kind of do too.
right.
And so we don't see her as a real person in
Yeah.
some ways. And I do think the scenes like whenever um, when she ends up hooking up with Eddie, which that's not in the book, of course.
Right.
But when she does that are moments where we actually get to see who she is as a person, and I like those parts.
Mm-hmm.
I like how in the series we actually see her as a photographer. We see her getting joy from that, not just being a mom.
Right.
So I think that in some ways, to me, there's moments where maybe the book Camilla is stronger, but I think the series Camilla, considering the time constraints, it's a more fleshed out character.
Yeah.
You
I get
know,
it.
but you know, but
And maybe I don't know, maybe my book love for her comes in large part from those pivotal moments, especially in Chicago.
yeah, I mean, like, let's talk about
And
that.
and I mean the final episode um I think it was
Perfect.
pretty darn close to perfection.
Yep.
Not that it went exactly like the book,
No.
because it didn't, but this is where I got okay with the songs because of the way they organized the show, the flashbacks, the currents, and the music that was playing at the time. That's where I kind of got okay with the music. But the final episode, I think, and the final section of the book, because it's not really chapters in the book, but the way Chicago played out.
So, because in the book, the whole thing plays out very differently because not Simone, Camila basically confronts Daisy and
Right.
says, "You're gonna have to, you're gonna have to leave him."
Yeah, because Pittsburgh never happened
Right.
in the book. Pittsburgh never happened in the book, but we go to Chicago, and
And Daisy is basically, she keeps going, but her heart is breaking every performance.
mm-hmm,
She was using drugs and Nikki to get by, and then Teddy's dead, and so she is just barely hanging on
Right.
because, and so basically, and Billy is getting more. It's messing with Billy even more too, and Camila basically tells her, you've got to go,"
Yeah.
and that's the scene that Julia remembers. She remembers Daisy and says, "Oh, I remember you. You were
That's
crying."
yeah, that's the other thing is that in the show when we reveal who the narrator, who the interviewer is,
Hmm.
it's her talking to her mom and remembering, "Oh, I remember that night. You and Dad were on the balcony. You were wearing this purple
She
dress."
was talking to her dad. She's talking to
Yeah.
Billy. Yeah.
Okay. But it was all about, I remember Mom, she was wearing this purple dress. You guys were on the balcony. And in the book, the big reveal comes and she's actually talking to Daisy. And she says, let's see here. I looked down the hall and I realized it was, well, out into the hallway comes Camilla and she's holding Julia. And author says, wait a minute. And then we get this note, author's note. While I have made a concerted effort to remove myself from the narrative, I have included here a verbatim transcript of one of the conversations I had with Daisy Jones because I am in fact the only one who can corroborate her the essential piece of Daisy's story. And Daisy goes on to say, yeah, and author says, you were wearing the white dress, yeah. And you were sitting in the hallway and you couldn't open your own door. Yeah. And my mom, yeah, your mom opened the door for me. So there's this conversation in the hallway. And Daisy, like you said, is so messed up that Camila, she can't get her key in the door. She can't get her door to work right. And so Camila has to let her in her room with Julia in her arms. And there's this whole conversation where she puts Julia down on the bed and gets her back to sleep. And then Daisy and Camila have this conversation that's one-on-one that says, Daisy, I don't know you very well, but I know you have a great heart and you're a good person. And I know my daughter wants to grow up to be you one day. So I don't want you to get hurt. I want good things for you. I want you to be happy. And I really mean that. You probably think that I don't, but I do. And she said she just wanted to make one thing really clear. I can't just sit here and watch you and Billy torture each other. I don't want that for the man I love. I don't want that for the father of my children. And I don't want that for you. And Daisy said, I don't want that either. And so then there's Billy. Billy's at the bar at this time. And Daisy comes back and says, Camilla said, Daisy, you need to leave this band. And at this point, Julia was fast asleep. Camilla said, if I'm wrong and you're already in the process of moving on and you're willing to let him move on, then don't listen to me. You have no responsibility to me. But if I'm right and you're doing us all a favor if you left and got yourself clean and found a life away from him. You'd be doing it for yourself, and yes, you'd be doing him a service, but also you'd be helping me take care of my children. This very candid conversation is one of those things that, like, I think I could, it makes sense to me. It makes sense to me of trying to speak to her one-on-one as woman to woman. I'm not going to get overly emotional. There's not going to be screaming and crying. I'm just going to lay it out for you.
Right.
You need to go.
Yeah.
And just like that.
No, it's a coming from
Very powerful.
A point of strength that's that's very different from the series.
Oh, I was going to say, it goes on. I was quiet for a while trying to process what Camilla was saying. And then she said, I think it's time for you to go. But whatever you decide, Daisy, just know that I am rooting for you. I want you to get clean, take care of yourself. And that's what I'm rooting for. And I finally said, why do you care about what happens to me? She said, I think almost everybody on this planet cares about you. I shook my head and I said, they like me. They don't care about me. And she said, no, you got that wrong. But again, it's just this whole conversation of, her just talking to Daisy. And this is the one where I think, is it this where she talks about, I don't need a perfect marriage.
Right.
It's probably further down and I don't want to continue to just read word for word, but I don't want a perfect marriage. I just want our marriage.
Right. Yep. I mean,
and while all this is going on,
Billy's down trying.
Billy's downstairs drinking,
Right. I think that
breaking his sobriety.
I think that Camila. Yes, I think it's really great in the book, and but I also think what happens in the series is also good because I
Hmm.
do wonder. I mean, Camila has seen all this going on. Like, I do think it's very realistic for her to tell Billy, "You need to decide what you want."
Right. Well, and think about the ballroom conversation that Camilla
Yes.
walks into the ballroom at the hotel,
Mm-hmm.
and the conversation that she and Daisy have there is equally as powerful,
Yes.
and takes some lines from this, but that conversation is very authentic and very real. And again, we're not getting emotional, we're not screaming and yelling, we're not sobbing and crying, we're not threatening anybody. We're just saying, I need you to, you know, do this.
Okay, but let's think about it just in this way, though. Is it less good, or is it, I don't know. In the book, it's the women who decide how this is going to be. Camila tells Daisy, "You got to leave him." And I guess in the series, in the same way, Daisy tells Billy, "You've got to go back to her." So okay, maybe I lost my argument myself there, but
I think both are equally as powerful because again, it's about a strong female character. The line that Daisy has at the very beginning, is this the part where the men go off and figure out the
right,
issue?
right,
Well, in this situation, no, it was not Daisy, or it was not Billy going out
Billy,
and figuring out what to do about this. It was in the book, Camilla and Daisy coming to an
yeah,
agreement, and even in the show, it was Camilla and Daisy in that ballroom, and then Daisy letting him go.
yeah, yeah. You're
Daisy
right.
let him go.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to go back and watch the whole series
I
again. I
know,
just
I
don't.
know.
And I
Um,
think I want to read the book again too.
yeah, I just started reading, and I was like, "Oh God, Crystal, you
Such a,
got stuff to do."
I'm such a freaking psycho.
But it's I think that ultimately the differences to me um, never took away from the quality of the show. If you'd never seen the if you'd never read the book, you wouldn't have even noticed these things. And so these differences are just choices that I think I can understand why they made them.
Yeah,
You
I
know?
would. I wish we were a big enough podcast that we could get the songwriters and
Yeah.
talk to them because I want to understand when they wrote the songs.
Like, did they already
Because
have the script? Like, did they have the
that's what I'm wondering.
every
Like,
script, and they knew?
did we know how the episodes, did we have the script for all the episodes? Because again, I go back to the changes to the songs made perfect sense based on the last episode. And I
Yeah,
was totally at peace with them. The way they ran through the songs and what was going on in the story, the songs were perfect because ultimately we ended up with Look at Us Now, and that song went from being a love song to the changes that Daisy made in the recording to a song about this band.
right.
And I know that Look at Us Now was Marcus Mumford was one of the writers. So, I mean, I'm not expecting Marcus Mumford to sit down with an interview, but I would just really love to know, like, how, like, was the script already written? And so they were able to kind of talk through it with the songwriters and say, here's what's going on, and here's how it ultimately ends up. And we need you
Right.
to write us some
Because
songs.
everything I've read doesn't really have that. I mean, I have found stuff where they talk about the songwriting, but not like where it was in the process.
Right. I would really love to know that.
I mean, it'd have to be pretty early on because, like, when you're writing it, they have to say, I don't know, it's really interesting to think about that.
I'd be very, very curious.
But so now let's just kind of go and talk about some highs and lows and some favorite parts to us. And we'll start with a couple of lows to me. A big low to me is, of course, Tim Oliphant's wigs. I've made fun of him. I feel like everybody else's wigs are pretty good, and like they do a good job of capturing kind of '90s hair. Especially I think Billy's hair is really good, and his little facial hair. And
Yeah.
also, like we mentioned, Daisy's hair, when we see even the little montage with her with the scrunchie when she's with her daughter, and then her hair and makeup in the in the 1997 interviews. But like Tim Oliphant's hair is just, I don't know what was going on with those wigs, but
Well, that's just, everybody else, the guys in the band all grew their hair out. So
yeah,
there was not a whole lot that they had. They just all, and they had the time and the opportunity to do it because, initially production was shut down because of COVID. So
right.
they had all of that time at home to, one, grow their hair out, two, practice their instruments and get better. So I don't know if Timothy Oliphant had something else going on that he couldn't
Probably
grow his hair out.
he was probably
But
shooting Justified, or he was being a ranger in some movie, or a sheriff, like, or in the Mandalorian or whatever, Book of
yeah,
Boba Fett, whatever.
I mean, I don't have as much. I guess like his '90s wig, I was okay
It
with.
was better.
It was
I
the
feel like that would
sitting
might
at
have
the
been some
pool
of
and
his hair, but that
sitting at the pool in his
that thing looked
shorty.
like it was going to come off any minute. It was going to fly off.
Look at his shorty. Yeah, his shorty robe at
Well,
the at poolside at the beginning was pretty funny. So
um, another low for me though is believing Sam Claflin was a teenager in that first episode. Like, I'm
yeah,
like, dude, you look 40.
yeah, you kind of. I
It
mean,
had
all of
that
them
like in
looked.
Dewey Cox when they're like, I'm only 14 years old, and he's like obviously 50. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean they did a good job of kind of aging Daisy, even when she went from being like, her original kind of solo stuff to being
Yeah.
in the six. They aged her pretty well, but yeah, it was a stretch. In
I mean,
some
I
of
did
those.
love the actors that played young Billy and Graham. I really loved the actor who played young Billy. I thought he was really good. But yeah, some of that I was like, come on, man, you look 40. I mean, he kind of looks old for his age anyway. I feel like he does, the actor.
Yeah,
So, and then another low, which is something that we've talked about to me, and this is a little bit more, more not so shallow, is just the choices that they make in kind of circling around tough topics like
right.
abortion and Simone's sexuality, and just kind of like the whole, somehow Camila intuits just by looking
Just by
at
those sad-looking Karen's eyes that she
that she's,
obviously is pregnant. Not
yeah,
that she's just sad.
right,
It
or like her
automatically goes
mom
from
died. I mean, there's a million reasons you could look like
yeah,
that. Like, that was so weird. And just also just not like Simone just going, I am gay. I'm gay.
yeah.
Like,
Because
kind of,
again, we know she may not have been able to be out in the public, but with her friends and
yes.
Daisy, she could be for real, and there wouldn't be, or with Teddy, she could be for real, and there wouldn't be a problem.
And just kind of going,
Hopefully,
well, they just didn't want me to. I'm telling you, Rachel, if I was in that situation, we were sitting by ourselves, I would have said, no, they wanted me to hide that I'm in love with Bernie.
yeah.
And so I couldn't do it. I wouldn't have done some kind of cryptic thing. So,
The little tap dance around
I
all of it.
mean, I look, I honestly still have a hard time understanding in some reasons why they made those choices. I feel like it was a little bit of a cop out. I don't know. But, you know, overall, that did it ruin the series for me? No. But it is still kind of like, what? Why'd you do that?
Yeah.
So,
So
but
some of the
from,
highs of the show.
so there's a
First off, the
highs.
aesthetic.
Yes.
And I told you I saw a couple of like social TikToks or Instagram posts where they're like, "That's not real." Gen Z, take a seat because you don't know what you're talking about. I mean, and it's like it's just crazy how the set design was just so spot on. I
Yes.
mean, just from canisters sitting on countertops to, clocks that were on walls to the televisions to the turntables. I mean, the aesthetic was just every detail was spot on for me. And I think the clothes were, and they weren't, and it wasn't, in the book, she talks a lot about how she gets sent all these Halston dresses, because again, she kind of has her own, recording history and stardom before she joined in with the Six in the book. So she would get all these Halston dresses. But in the series, the look that they gave it was completely realistic as far as what you would think that somebody at that state of their career would be able to afford and be able to wear. So, I mean, I just really thought the looks were all really, really good as far as, the way they dressed.
Well, and the way it's shot, I think, is really it has a very warm. There's a warmth to all the shots, and it has like a, I would call it like a California glow to it. Like it's they picked a color palette, and everything is kind of got these earthy tones that you think of when you think of the 70s, like
Exactly.
it's the colors in their wardrobe, the colors that they wear, like we talked about the choices of clothes, like who's wearing light colored clothes, who's wearing dark colored clothes at certain points in the show. I think it's, I mean, that's why they pay art directors for, and costume designers. But I thought it looked, especially in this time where they really are, budgets are so tight for these kinds of shows. I thought it did look lush and expensive, and it didn't look like, it looked more like a movie versus a TV series.
Right.
So,
Yeah. And Amazon, Amazon usually does a pretty good job with that.
yeah, I
You
mean,
know, with
spent a lot of money on Lord of the Rings.
but just to get like authentic looking as far as costume
Yeah,
and even like the color, the lighting and the tone, it's just they usually do a pretty good job of that. I'm thinking of that one Riot Girls, that was the newspaper show.
oh
It
yeah,
only
Girls
lasted for a
Gone.
season.
Yeah, that was a good show. And
It was a
I
very
mean,
good show.
Marvelous Miss Maisel has some beautiful, really
Yeah,
good, really good stuff like that.
yeah,
Um,
that's another one for sure.
okay, well, another high for me is the end of episode 3, when they finally record Honeycomb, because it is, you've been waiting for this. The first couple of episodes they're okay. They're putting everybody in place. You're getting everything arranged, but then and you're just waiting for this to finally happen because it's called Daisy Jones and the Six. Eventually, they have to be together, and we haven't even seen them in a scene together, other than like these little kind of walk-bys. And when she walks in, and and that first moment when she starts singing, you know, with him, and they harmonize, and it is electric and perfect. And from that moment, there's funny parts, there's a lot of jokes, it really tightens up the pace of the show, and you feel excited, and it's just, and it ends on this high, and you're like, oh my god, I can't wait to see the next episode and see what
Yeah,
happens.
is that the one where he's like, "I'm a motherfucking genius"? Was that
Yes.
was that how was Teddy was like, "I'm a motherfucking genius"? I don't know if it was there
No,
when they
I
finished,
can't remember.
or was that when they finished recording the whole album?
I think it's
I
when
don't
they
know.
finish recording, in the next episode when they finish recording.
Yeah, but you're that. I mean, we talked about it in pretty good detail when we recapped that episode. But the dynamic there that you saw come alive, and this creation of this band that was coming forth simply by these two people finally being able to sing together, was
I mean, when
pretty
they
electric.
sing, did we unravel that part? When they sing, that part is so amazing. And then you see Karen look like, oh, like you see, and it's not, it's so hard sometimes because in things like this, it's like, oh, they're supposed to be awesome, and they're not. Actually, and then this one, they actually it is. It's amazing.
It's very, yeah. And just in general, I think overall the music, not just the music that was created for the band, but the music throughout the series
Yeah,
was so well thought out and picked and
like the songs that they
placed.
close every song with is so good. Like like we talked about some of the stuff that's just playing in the background that they use is very interesting. They're not just putting like the cliche is anytime there's you know a a movie or something set in the 60s, then you got to play, Are You Going to San Francisco? Or they're going to play, Fortunate Son from, Credence. Like,
Hmm.
you're going to hear these kind of, the same songs, and then the
Right.
fact that they didn't do that.
The Forrest Gump soundtrack, which is a good
Yeah.
soundtrack, but
Yeah, I mean,
still, they're the
Freedom Rock.
typicals.
They're going to play Freedom Rock.
Yeah.
In this, they don't. They really made some interesting choices in those songs that they used at the end of every episode. All the music in the background, what they're hearing, even the when the really wonderful song that they sing, the Ooh La La song. That's not a song that's a song you're like, oh, I forgot. That's a cool song, but it's not like
Yeah.
part of something you hear all the time.
Right.
I think those were really the music supervisors were really smart in that sense, in creating this. And of course, like it better be a damn highlight since that's what the show's about. The high had better be the music in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I would say another high is just Riley Keough. I mean, what a great actress.
I'm still just so incredibly blown away that, she, although she came from this musical family, that was not her thing. She was always into film. She never considered herself, musically inclined. And yet, with some great coaching and talent, she has, it was like she was always a musician to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's just she's beautifully acted by her, and everybody I think in the show is really good, but I think she's just such a highlight.
Yeah. And I'm just wondering what she's going to do. I mean, I know she probably has other projects already in play, but I will definitely be checking them out, even if they're not musically related, because she's extremely talented. And
So,
Sam Claflin, I mean, everybody had seen Sam Claflin, and he admits I think he did some musical theater in high school or at uni, but I mean, he became Billy.
yeah,
He pulled it off
yeah.
and did what he needed to do to sell it. So I still want an SNL performance by Daisy Jones and the Six
I want something. I want them to
after the
perform at
writer's strike.
something. Come on,
After the
come
writer's
on,
strike is resolved
come
next year,
on,
can we
AMTPT. Get your whatever the AM.
can we get them as a musical? Riley Keough could host, and Daisy Jones and the Six could be the musical guest.
I mean, I have a feeling that window is probably out now because
Yeah,
they're
I know.
probably going to be doing films now. So,
I mean, that's what I figured as well. But a girl can hope, right?
yeah. So, because I'm almost out of voice anyway. So, how do we feel now that it's all over?
I mean, I still go back to I don't think enough people are talking about this show.
I was going to tell you that, I've been trying to learn guitar, and Ultimate Guitar Tabs is where I go to look at guitar stuff. And all of the songs have been tabbed. They've created tabs for it on Ultimate Guitar.
Nice,
So, I mean, like, that's kind of, it's popular enough for that.
right? That's kind of cool.
I
But
just
yeah,
do
I
think
don't.
it's so hard unless you're the Flash, unless you're in a Marvel movie. or you're an HBO show, for you to really get into the zeitgeist in the way that we think things should be.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's so
And
many things that we love, and I don't understand. No one, then they'll be like, and like, I've never seen it, and you're like, what?
yeah. Yeah. But I mean, I think this is starting something great for Taylor Jenkins Reid. I mean, they did just release a movie based on one of her other books. Hadn't done that well. It's not a book of hers that I've read. But we know Evelyn Hugo, The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, is slated for Netflix. And so people are anxiously awaiting
That's going to be
casting,
good, I think. I
casting
think
for
they'd have
that.
to work really hard to screw that up.
Yeah. We'll probably have to come back and do.
Yeah, we'll definitely get to talk
we'll
about
definitely
that.
do a Evelyn Hugo
I mean,
I'm just curious, casting of what that's going to look like. But yeah, so I mean, for me, it's always kind of cool to see these writers that I've read that were a part of this world that isn't often a part of the I don't know the mainstream.
it's exciting whenever something you like becomes something that
People
is
get it
bigger. Hmm.
when people start paying attention to it. But yeah, I mean, I'm. It'll be, this will be a book and an audiobook that'll be like a reread for me.
Oh, yeah.
I'm one of these people, like if I finish a really emotional book or, a series, or a trilogy that's really like leaves me with what we call the book hangover, I oftentimes struggle with getting back into, starting to read another book. And so I have my, my comfort reads that I'll go back to and read when I'm kind of in a book slump or, I'm in the middle of a book hangover or something that I will go back to. And Daisy Jones and the Six is definitely going to be one of those that I will go back and either listen to or read as kind of one of those comfort reads. So, and the series will be one of those that I will, as long as Amazon keeps it up, I will go back and watch it. I'll probably start again tonight. I haven't watched it since it ended.
I truly do miss. I miss the characters, and I want to
We
know
should,
more
we
about
should write
them.
fanfic.
You
We should go
know,
look and see if there's
I'm
Daisy
sure
Jones and
there
Six
is. Come
fanfic
on,
out there.
there is.
Oh my god, I didn't even think about that.
But I really, it's just, yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to the next, to seeing the Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo.
Yep.
And, I think we've got maybe one more thing that we're going to tease out of this show for us. The next podcast is going to be about the music, the tracks, the actual names of the tracks, those songs. We'll talk about some of the music that's used in the show, and of course the actual songs that were written for Daisy Jones and the Six. So
Yeah.
we'll talk about that. So
We'll
be
be back.
sure to keep listening. Um,
You can find us on Instagram. Now that school's out, maybe I'll go back in there and start reposting some stuff. Have some time to do some things.
yeah.
But yeah, you can find us on Instagram at nobodysmuses. You can find us on YouTube. You can hear us wherever you like to listen to your favorite podcast, or send us an email at Gmail. Gmail. What am I trying to say? Anyway, nobodysmuses@gmail.com.
Yep.
We would love to hear from you. If you have any thoughts of your highs and lows or your differences from the book to the series that we didn't touch on, please reach out. We would love to hear from you about that. And yeah, we're going to come back. We're going to talk about some more music, as Crystal said, and then we'll kind of see where we're going to go from there.
Yep.
Who knows?
I'm just really proud of us that we did it. So,
So I know we did it.
yep.
We
So,
got it done.
all right. Talk to
All
y'all
right.
later. Bye.
Thanks. Until next time.
Bye.